Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/JustNoMil. In today's episode, I'm living in an enmeshed hell and I feel like I'm going insane. Help, codependent Mael has won my wife over and it's killing my family. How to explain to Mael that I'm not having my child around toxic family? I cannot stand the phrase, as long as they're a good grandparent, you should let them see the kids. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. I'm living in an enmeshed hell and I feel like I'm going insane. Please don't judge me too harshly for some of the decisions I've made. I know in hindsight that there have been many red flags I chose to ignore. Let's start at the start. February last year. I, 30F, had been in a relationship with my partner, 38M, for just over a year and was looking for a new place to live as my housemate had to move out due to losing her job. My partner stayed in a different area about 1.5 hours away during the week in a house that his company rented for him as they had a contract there, and on weekends he came back to the house he owns in the same suburb I lived in. I stayed at his house often and his mom was always there. He explained to me that she spent her time staying between staying there and in a different state in a home she owned where his brother, Sael, and their kids live. We shall call this the Gold Coast house. As I was in the process of looking at and applying for apartments, he made the suggestion that I move into the house he owned, where he would join me on weekends, but during the week it would just be me and his mom when she was there. To be fair, at this point I wasn't totally in the dark about his mom, as I knew that everybody who had lived with her, ex-husband, friends, both of my partner's siblings etc., had moved out, and I guessed it may be due to her overbearing and nosy nature. I, being an idiot, thought that I would be fine as I'm a pretty laid-back person and she had only good intentions. Well, things were pretty good for a while, although I felt a little trapped as she insisted on knowing my every movement, where I was going, what I bought when I went to the shop and how much it cost, what I ate, how many carbohydrates I consumed per day etc. Not only did she need to know this information, she needs to relay it to each of the 20+ people, friends, family, anyone who can put up with her incredibly long, repetitive and one-sided conversations she calls on speakerphone every single day. She spends about 90% of her waking hours sitting at the dining table, which has a view of the kitchen, front and back doors and lounge, so basically you cannot make a move without her knowing and interrogating you about it. Every night when I got back from the gym, I would sit and watch TV with her, and every night she would regale me with the exact same stories of everybody who had wronged her in her entire life, including, but not limited to, each of her children, their partners, her sisters, her ex-husband, her mother's sister, women she studied nursing with, various friends, her nieces, her siblings' partners and their families, the Indian lady at her water aerobics gym, the Indian lady she used to work with, the Indian lady who yelled at her in a parking lot. The list goes on and on. Still, I felt that I could handle it. At least she was nice to me, right? Well, apart from the comments like how she would never rent a house to an Indian person and how she hates coconut oil because it smells like Indian people, I am part Indian, which I've told her many times, but for some reason she calls me Pakistani. Cut to July last year, my partner's Sael was having surgery, so Mael decided to fly to the Gold Coast house to help Sael as she recovered. While she was there, Sael and I talked a bit as I asked her how she was doing with the recovery etc. Also during this time, my partner was getting constant phone calls from his mother complaining about various things. Sael washed her water glass when she wasn't done with it, they ate white bread, the kids wanted to spend time with just their parents, Sael didn't tell her where they were going when they left the house or invite her. Sael is too anxious and that's why the kids are like that. This felt like a particularly low blow as 2 of the kids have ASD, so have some behavioral differences, but are all round very sweet kids who are a joy to be around. Eventually Sael messaged me asking for advice about the situation, mentioning that my partner had been messaging her, kind of implying that his mother was acting this way because of something her and or the kids had done. This got us to talking about Mael and her toxic behavior, and I found out some interesting things from her. Basically, Mael had lived with them for about 18 months a few years before, but they'd had to ask her to leave as she was physically harming the kids and the kids were scared of her. Basically, MIL just has a long history of toxic behavior, and this is why nobody in the family apart from my partner want her to live with them. I also found out she had said a lot of negative things about me to Sael. I knew she would have, because of the way she talks negatively about literally everyone in her life, but just heard the specifics like complaining about my tattoos, my cat, etc. Oh yeah, and she absolutely doesn't live between my partner's house and the Gold Coast house, she lives in my partner's house 100% of the time. However, blissfully, she got stuck on the Gold Coast for an extra month, because most of Australia went into lockdown. That month was so incredibly peaceful and romantic for us, except for her constant calls complaining about the Sael and family. Eventually, her complaining escalated into threats of suicide if my partner didn't let her come home, despite it being the middle of a lockdown due to extremely high case numbers and deaths, and MIL being 72 and having asthma, making it very dangerous to fly back, and my partner and I being unvaccinated, not anti-vax, they just weren't rolled out to our age group yet at that time. My partner eventually succumbed to her theatrics and told her she could fly back. Once she got back, she had a fit about me not being welcoming enough to her and just generally stomped around and pouted and guilt-tripped my partner. Oh, she also blocked my partner and his sister on Facebook as some kind of punishment for all this, which was the funniest thing to me because she's the type who posts daily about what a great mother and grandmother she is and how much she loves her kids, so she lasted I think 2 days before having to unblock them and continue her social media charade. I feel like this is enough for one post, but I have so much venting to do. I'll make more later as there's a lot of ground to cover and I need advice. Han, you're not going to like this. Your partner, 38, lives with his mom and expects you to live with her too. He caters to her delusions. He suckered you into being her babysitter when he's away on business. You are only 30. You have time to learn from this and move on, much richer in knowledge than you were a year ago. If you stay, nothing will change. That's not true. If you stay, she will continue to delve deeper and deeper into your daily business and routines because she feels entitled to that info. Do you really want to live this way for the next 30 years? MIL is content. So is content. You are the only one not content. They have zero incentive to change. Thank you. This actually sums everything up so concisely and is the kind of clarity I needed. Especially your last point. That's such a good way of putting it. Nothing is going to change unless I change it. Probably time to get an apartment and move out. You're there to be her keeper while he is gone. Best wishes on leaving him and finding a good guy who puts you first. My observation is you now have valuable information. Your partner lied to you about MIL's true living situation. Your MIL uses you as her primary form of entertainment. You're so caves into his mother's demands, despite what is best for the two of you. She even is harsh on kids with autism. She isn't going to change. Please do not be insulted. I don't know how else to put this. You must like the drama because I would have left with the dining room behavior. She hurt her grandkids. Repeat this, actual children are too scared to spend time alone with her. Children are scared, not annoyed, not indifferent, scared of her. This is not just a red flag, you got a red bed set, matching towels, and living room furniture. Dang. This was happening to me. I broke off my engagement because of him not setting boundaries with his mom. He lied and was expecting me to live with his mom forever. She owned the home. So her house, her rules. She'll never change. You made a super smart choice. Saved yourself a lifetime of stress and unhappiness. She physically harmed her grandchildren and their parents let her back in the house? The rest of the story is irrelevant. You seem really nice, and have actually put up with a lot from your so. He absolutely lied to you about his racist mother and her living situation. Her home is there in his house and nowhere else. If he can't tell you the truth about something like who he lives with full time, I would be questioning a lot of things. Also say you decide you can live with it and have children with this person. How could you trust your physically abusive to children MIL anywhere near them? It would be hell on earth to be afraid for your child's physical safety in your own home. Just really think hard about this situation you are in. I'm sorry you are dealing with it. Help, codependent MIL has won my wife over and it's killing my family. My 35M wife has always been extremely close to her mother and MIL seemingly cannot live without interfering in her child's life. When, as a young couple, we lived in NYC, 1:30 away from MIL, it was daily texts, calls, forwarded emails reminding of danger when we were traveling, etc. To give you illustrations. When we visited my in-laws for a weekend, and my wife and I went out in the village for ice creams, we would return to their house to find my MIL sulking because my wife didn't give her enough time. When we planned a trip to Thailand, my wife was so afraid to tell her mother, because Thailand is dangerous or no one goes away for 2 weeks early in their career, that she would only confess it a week before the departure, find a pretext, I need a getaway, going through a nervous breakdown, to make it acceptable. Upon return, we couldn't easily talk about the trip with her parents. Dozens of other anecdotes like this. This type of behavior, the need for control and guilt tripping, had already estranged my wife's older brother, who went and lived 5h away for this very specific reason. It is also known and acknowledged by most of her friends and some of her family I spoke to. Subject is delicate, obviously. When COVID hit, we temporarily moved back to her parents. Their house is big, in the countryside, and my wife was pregnant, who knew what the pandemic was going to be. I didn't think much about it. In my mind we were going to be back to living our life after a couple months when the dust settled. Little by little, I could sense my wife becoming completely enmeshed in her mother's neurosis, and becoming a very different person. When it was time to move out 6 months later, she refused moving back to NYC, and refused a larger town that is 45 minutes away from parents. She only accepted a small village that is 10 minutes away from parents. She was pregnant, crying, I bent. When our son was born, she never went the extra mile to find independent care, or accept that I do. Because COVID. She has since spent every weekday at her parents' because they can take care of our son and I can work remotely from their place. He is now 1.5 years old, has not been socialized yet, and will only enter daycare in September. She has constantly refused talking about sleep training him. I will never do this, or how we were going to wean breastfeeding. It's my body, my choice. Prove to me you are worth having this discussion. I believe this is so that she can stay absolutely necessary to our son at the obvious cost of stunting his independence. Edit, all those preferences, and others, are perfectly fine. Not being willing to discuss them and compromise, but instead enforcing your preference is not. Coincidence, which you guessed, all of those preferences are also her mother's preferences. Even though I made it abundantly clear that I don't want to stay in this small village so close to her parents any longer, she proceeded to buy a house in the village and is planning to move there in the fall. We always said we would decide and buy our primary residence together. In the process, she visited some houses with her mom, not me. She hid those visits from me. She, still now, refuses for me to spend 24 hours alone with our son. She has constructed an elaborate lie, long story, to make me bend and abandon the idea to spend 24 hours alone with him. I have not. She insults me weekly. I have insulted her once in 8 years, has been physical twice recently. I am much stronger than her so I don't feel threatened at all, but still edit. This was physical but very mild, e.g. slightly push me out of bed repeatedly when I refused to go sleep on the couch bc she was mad. She refuses for us to find a nanny for the summer, her mother can do it. Last straw, there has been a recent instance where her mother refused to hand me my own son, spewing a torrent of rage on me, while pointing her finger at me very much like on the banner of this sub. I tried my best to stay calm and ask for my son. She didn't give me my son back. Wife did nothing. After years of trying to reason with her, I changed my job for her to feel more secure. I mostly dropped travel for 2.5 years to reassure her COVID fears. I am a foreigner and would love my son to see his grandparents and know my culture more. We went to couples therapy where the subject was never accepted on the table or she would cry endlessly. I am now at a time of decisions. I would love to be able to connect with folks who have gone through the same and understand if anyone has an experience with codependency. Particularly, do you have any advice for me? Am I lying to myself thinking that if codependency was solved, the situation can be salvaged? Thank you so much. I feel very bad, especially when I think about my son growing up like this. You have got to change the narrative of not being able to take care of your son on your own. They are laying the groundwork to have primary custody. Those two are plotting. You have to get ahead of this. You need to get your ducks in a row. Talk to an attorney, social worker, etc. Please start documenting everything. You are going to need it. Also, whatever you do, do not get her pregnant again while this is going on. Push for marriage counseling. You need to get some support. Start recording MIL when she refuses to give your baby back. Do you have friends you can invite over under the guise of hanging out, but it is to observe and be a witness to their madness? They may already be planning to prevent you from seeing your son. The only advice is this: accept that your wife's spouse is her mother. That's it. People have to want to change, and it's clear that your wife is fully on board with the established quo. But this doesn't mean you have to be. Start your CYA binder. If you don't know what that is, then just search the sub and document everything. Find out your local laws for recording conversations and record all interactions with your wife and MIL all the time if the law permits. If it doesn't, write it all down on your phone or in a little pocketbook as soon as it happens. Memory is fallible, and the more time that passes, the more likely you'll be to forget important details. Jot down the W's: who, what, when, where, why, and how. Plan your exit with a lawyer who can advise you about GPR and custody arrangements. Don't sign anything. Freeze your credit, or at least set up alerts. Finally, next time your MIL oversteps by not allowing you to hold your own child, remain calm and tell her you will call the police if she doesn't comply. It's far past time for you to show your teeth, and remember, if you're recording all of this, it only strengthens whatever case you may need to make. Plus, while actually following through may make you feel like a heel, it may encourage them to think twice about treating you as a doormat. As for your wife, again, record everything you're legally allowed to, and sit her down for a come to talk. Explain to her the seriousness of not socializing your children. Tell her how inappropriate it is for her to prioritize her mother over her spouse and children. Tell her you've seen her regress over the last 2 years and explain exactly what that looks like, comparing specific examples. Tell her that you didn't marry a mother-daughter pair, you married her, and even more importantly, she married you. Finally, state your boundaries. If our relationship continues in the same vein it's been traveling for the last 2 years, then I will have to remove myself from it, as it no longer resembles the type of relationship I want or deserve to have. Your wife needs to be told in no uncertain terms that you are just as much a parent as she is, and she doesn't reserve the right to make unilateral decisions regarding the welfare of your children. It's important to declare, out loud, your commitment to being a present and active parent. The fact that you aren't allowed to care for your own son is the biggest red flag deal breaker. Just end of the line. Get a lawyer ASAP. Your son deserves to know you, his and other grandparents, and to be socialized in general. I agree with documentation and start saving up, because they're going to fight you in court with all they have. If your wife already bought a house without you and is refusing you rights to visit child, then the marriage is already over and it is time to get courts involved. You have, depending on the country, at least right to the full weekend and half holidays. She, and she being either woman in this scenario, cannot keep you from your child. Your wife has chosen to be a parent with MIL instead of you, whatever. But she can't just erase you from the picture. Document, papers, court. You have, depending on the country, at least right to the full weekend and half holidays. This is apparently the US. Mil lives 1.5 hours out of New York City. He has the right to 50-50 custody, not just weekends and holidays. I believe you try one time of, you have become the very parts of your mother we moved away to fight in the first place. Either we move and get counseling now, or I need a divorce. You deserve to be happy, man. I like this suggestion a lot, hope OP sees it. Start documenting everything because my friend, the marriage is already over. Good luck. Your marriage is over. Get a lawyer. A good lawyer and take her to court immediately. I would go as far as trying for sole custody and let her try to fight it. At the very least, she will get part custody and be forced to hand over your child. Make sure the lawyer knows she's been physical and mentally/emotionally abusive. Don't get sentimental here, what she is doing is very, very wrong. And make sure you tell the lawyer you want first rights so she can't let Mil have the baby either. Everything this person said. How to explain to Mil that I'm not having my child around toxic family? There's been a lot happened since the birth of our daughter, now 16 months. How do I explain why both myself and my baby won't be around my emotionally manipulative Mil and even Sael? There seems to be this thing about even though I've been on the receiving end of such nasty and verbally abusive behavior, that my daughter should still automatically be around those people, which is ridiculous to me. I'm her mother and supposed to protect her from such people. I do not trust them to be appropriate around her as they haven't in the past, and can't even control what they say to me, nasty vile things as a result of me not giving them exactly what they want. Update: So family have had a massive go at him for defending me once again and setting his own boundaries with them. These people won't change. It's sad that they're pushing him away too. Don't engage. Hubby can tell them, when they ask why they can't see LO, guess you should have been nicer or at least more respectful to baby's mom. And then end the conversation. Deadpan stares and not engaging is more powerful than debating. Oh, I love the deadpan stare. It works better than any argument ever does. Total power move. Why they can't see LO? What is LO? You don't really need to explain why. You can just say no. If you need to explain to so, you tell him what you have told us. They are mean to me. I don't trust them to act reasonably with my daughter. The first step to rebuilding trust would be treating me well. Your behavior to date has demonstrated that you can't act like a civilized adult. I will not have my child around abusive behavior and I will protect her from toxic people. And then they come back with we would never treat LO like that. I went through the same thing, I just didn't say anything. I left the in-laws up to the hubby and ignored them. I'm coming up 4 years in and I don't regret it in the slightest. Your kids don't see your in-laws? I just read your history. This has been going on for the longest time and yet nothing seems to have changed at all? You have the same issues since your daughter was born. What is your husband doing/saying/acting to make this change? Are you still seeing the therapist? What are they telling you? I mean, I can sit here and agree wholeheartedly that you and your husband and child should definitely stay no contact. To me that makes perfect sense, from what you have said. However, since you keep putting a similar post up semi-regularly, it sounds like you and husband are not on the page, let alone the same chapter. I think you and your husband have much work to do, to get on the same page and deal with his family as a united front. I hope it all works out for you. My DH simply told his mother that we are not comfortable seeing her. And we stuck to it. There was drama, but in the end, we're not living with her constant sh*t anymore. It's pretty peaceful nowadays. Why would I subject my daughter to people that speak to me the way you do? That would obviously be damaging to her, and it's unreasonable of you to continue asking. And it will damage her. My oldest still gets worked up about the way my MIL talked to me before I developed a backbone. Yes, I lost a lot of respect for my parents long before I was even a teenager for the way they always caved to the paternal side's manipulations. I realized at a young age that any relationship I had with them was going to be superficial at best. I cannot stand the phrase, as long as they're a good grandparent, you should let them see the kids. Any grandparent who disrespects and is hateful towards the parent of the child is automatically a bad grandparent. I'm so sick of family trying to guilt me into letting my MIL babysit or loosen boundaries with her. This woman has shown me no respect for the last 6 years. Why would I be comfortable leaving someone like that with my kids? It doesn't matter how much she loves them, they are half of me, and she hates me. So that's an automatic no. Just ranting. Anyone else constantly hear this phrase and want to scream? I said this about my MIL for years. She and I don't get along, but she's a fantastic grandmother to my kids. With my first two, I let her take them camping for weeks at a time. They had sleepovers, they had their own special traditions, holidays were awesome, and she truly was an awesome grandma. And then, one day, she wasn't. Turns out that when my kids were old enough to have differing opinions, and she had to make an effort to really get to know them and appreciate aspects of them that had nothing to do with her, she became very much not a fantasic grandmother to my kids. She was only awesome with them for as long as it benefited her. Teenagers, as we all know, benefit in 01, and by the time my youngest two were born, she had virtually nothing to do with any of my kids. I don't use that phrase anymore now. I've switched to she's gotta die someday. You say to them, so let me get this straight. As long as she is nice to them, it doesn't matter if she treats me like crap. Ha, interesting theory, but no. I reject that reasoning, end of story. But she loves her grandbabaya so much. Been there, done that. Just know. Anyone who doesn't respect you doesn't love those kids enough. It takes a village to run a monster out to MIL. Yep. And they always come back and say it's our fault, that we make a unilateral decision on who can be with our children. My in-laws are livid. We're spending time with my family right now. But they can't seem to grasp that we are all spending time together. I didn't just fork over my kids to my family and have them tell me to buzz off. Even if I did, there must be a reason for it. They aren't a good grandparent if they stress the parents out. Usually they're good with very small children, and then they use that attachment to continue unhealthy behavior when the kid gets older. I'm with you. But what's as bad or worse are parents who waffle about whether to allow their own bad parents to spend time with their grandchildren, because children deserve to know their grandparents. What a bunch of hooey. Yeah, I chose a family-friendly word there, but I'm thinking something else. I think it is very valuable for everyone to have connections with people from generations older and younger than themselves. But ideally, those are people who bring something positive to the relationship. And they sure as heck do not need to share DNA for that connection to be valuable and long-lasting. You are absolutely correct. It's called the consequences of her own actions. The flying monkeys can kick rocks right along with Mel. Keep up the good work. If she doesn't respect you as the parents, then she shouldn't have access to your child. Unpopular opinion, but grandparents are not entitled to a relationship with their grandkids if they do not treat both parents correctly. Being a grandparent is a privilege, and respecting both parents is a prerequisite. It's not healthy for the parents or the children if the grandparents don't respect the rules of the parents. Totally agree. That is not an unpopular opinion in this sub. I was baffled when BIL stated with some emphasis that ILs did dog sit their dog overnight. I wouldn't do that. Was my instant thought, and it took a lot not to say it. MIL is not alone in the same room as my kids due to her manipulative behavior. She's not a good grandparent. Her wants are more important than my kids' needs, and she'd do a lot to have things her way. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.